I'm Ron, 27 years old, a software developer from Boston, who once thought family meant unconditional support. Growing up, we were close-knit until my parents demanded I pay my brother Tyler's $3,000 credit card debt. When I refused, they insisted I give him my car instead. Standing my ground cost me my home when they kicked me out, calling me selfish. After a year of silence, my phone rang with a call I never expected. Before I tell you how my life fell apart and what happened when my parents finally called me a year later, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and subscribe to hear more stories like mine. I grew up in a modest split-level house in suburban Boston, with parents who worked hard but were never quite comfortable financially. My father, Martin, was a dedicated construction foreman who took pride in never missing a day of work in 30 years. My mother, Diane, worked part-time as a receptionist at a dental office while maintaining the household with meticulous care. Our family wasn't wealthy, but we always had what we needed, except when it came to treating my brother and me equally. Tyler, my older brother, by 3 years, was always the golden child. Even from my earliest memories, I could see the pattern of favoritism, though I didn't have the words for it then. When Tyler broke Mom's favorite vase playing ball in the house, it was dismissed as boys being boys. When I accidentally spilled juice on the carpet a week later, I was grounded for carelessness. These small inequities built up over the years, creating an unspoken hierarchy in our family dynamics. Tyler had the advantage of charisma. He could charm anyone with his easy smile and quick jokes. Teachers, relatives, even strangers would comment on how personable he was while describing me as the quiet one. What most people outside our family didn't see was how that charm masked a lack of follow-through that defined much of his life. He'd start projects with enthusiasm but abandon them when they required sustained effort. His room was filled with half-finished models, partially read books, and sports equipment for teams he quit mid-season. Meanwhile, I found my identity in reliability and academic achievement. I wasn't trying to compensate for Tyler's shortcomings. I genuinely enjoyed learning and the satisfaction of completing what I started. By high school, the contrast between us became more pronounced. I was on the honor roll editor of the school newspaper and saving money from my weekend job at the local hardware store. Tyler had been held back a year, cycled through multiple friend groups, and had a growing reputation for borrowing money he never repaid. College only widened the gap between our paths. I earned a partial scholarship to study computer science at a state university and worked 20 hours a week at the campus IT help desk to cover the remaining costs. I budgeted, carefully applied for every possible scholarship, and graduated with minimal student loans. Tyler, on the other hand, enrolled in the community college's business program with vague plans about entrepreneurship, only to drop out after one semester. He then tried a culinary program, quit after 3 months, and finally attempted a certification in personal training that he never completed. Despite his academic struggles, my parents never seemed to lose faith that Tyler would eventually find his path. "He's still figuring things out," my mother would say defensively whenever relatives inquired about his progress. "Not everyone is meant for traditional education," my father would add, though his tone carried a weariness that grew over the years. After graduating with my computer science degree, I was fortunate to land a junior developer position at a growing software company in Boston. The pay wasn't extraordinary for the field, but it offered stability and growth potential. Rather than immediately renting an apartment in the expensive Boston market, I made the practical decision to continue living at home for a year or two, contributing $500 monthly toward household expenses, while aggressively saving for a down payment on my own place. Tyler, at 30, had settled into a pattern of jumping between sales jobs that offered more commission potential than stability. He would start each position with enthusiastic predictions about the money he'd make, only to quit when the reality of consistent effort became clear. Between jobs, he'd live at home rent-free with our parents covering his car insurance, phone bill, and often his credit card minimums. The credit cards became a particular source of tension in the household, though it was rarely addressed directly. Tyler had accumulated at least 6 different cards that I knew of each, approaching its limit with purchases. He couldn't justify designer clothes, the latest electronics, weekend trips, with friends and meals at restaurants well beyond his budget. When statements arrived, he'd make promises about getting his finances under control, sometimes making minimum payments from his latest job before the cycle repeated. My parents' enabling behavior grew more pronounced as we entered adulthood. They co-signed for Tyler's car loan when his credit score was too low to qualify on his own. They paid his rent for 3 months when he decided to move out but couldn't maintain employment. They even covered a $1,000 repair bill when he damaged a friend's motorcycle that he'd borrowed without permission. Each time they'd call these instances helping him through a rough patch, but the patches had become the entire quilt of his adult life. Looking back, I can see how this pattern set the stage for the confrontation that would eventually tear our family apart. By continuing to rescue Tyler from the consequences of his choices, my parents had created an expectation that someone would always be there to clean up his messes. What none of us expected was that I would ultimately be designated as that someone, or that my refusal would cost me my place in the family. The evening that changed everything started like many others in our household. It was a Tuesday in April, and my mother had prepared her signature meatloaf with mashed potatoes, comfort food that often preceded uncomfortable conversations in our family. I had noticed my parents exchanging meaningful glances throughout the meal, and Tyler was uncharacteristically quiet, focusing intently on his food rather than dominating the conversation as usual. As my father served himself a second helping, he cleared his throat, another warning sign I'd learned to recognize over the years. "So, Ron," he began, his tone aiming for casual but missing the mark. "Work going well? That promotion still on the horizon?" I nodded, instantly wary. "Should hear about it next month. The project I'm leading is wrapping up on schedule, so I'm optimistic." "That's great," my mother chimed in with too much enthusiasm. "You've always been so responsible with your career and your finances." She emphasized the last word while shooting a quick glance at Tyler, who suddenly became very interested in rearranging his peas. My father took a deep breath. "Speaking of finances, we've got a bit of a situation we need to discuss as a family." He turned toward Tyler. "Do you want to explain, or should I?" Tyler shrugged, still not making eye contact with anyone. "It's not that big a deal. I'm just in a temporary bind with one of my credit cards." My father's expression tightened. $3,000 isn't what I'd call a temporary bind, Tyler. The card is maxed out and they're threatening to send it to collections. A familiar sinking feeling settled in my stomach as I realized where this conversation was heading. My suspicions were confirmed when my mother reached across the table to pat my hand. "Honey, we know you've been doing so well saving for your condo down payment, and we wouldn't ask if there were any other options." I set my fork down carefully. "Are you asking me to pay off Tyler's credit card debt?" The direct question hung in the air for a moment before my father nodded. "Just until he gets back on his feet. He has a promising lead on a sales position with Berkshire Insurance. Commission-based, but his friend Marcus says top performers clear 6 figures annually." Tyler finally looked up, his expression, a practiced blend of contrition and optimism that I'd seen countless times. "I'd pay you back within 3 months, 6 at the most. This opportunity could be the big break I've been waiting for." My mother jumped in before I could respond. "We've helped him with smaller amounts before, but with the bathroom renovation and your father's back treatments not fully covered by insurance, we just don't have it this time." She lowered her voice, as if sharing a confidence. "Family helps family, Ron. That's what we've always taught you boys." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. Yes, family helps family, but in our household that help had always flowed in one direction, toward Tyler. As the reality of their request sank in, I felt a complex mix of emotions brewing: disbelief that they would actually ask this of me, anger at the unfairness, and beneath it all, a deep hurt that they viewed my financial responsibility as a resource to be tapped for Tyler's irresponsibility. "What exactly happened to create this debt?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Tyler shrugged again. "Just life, man. Car needed repairs, had to replace my phone when it fell in the lake at Marcus's cabin, bought some new suits for interviews. It adds up." "The suits were an investment in his career," my mother added quickly. I took a deep breath. "Tyler, you're 30 years old. This isn't your first financial emergency. What's your plan to handle money better going forward? Because bailing you out won't help if you just repeat the same patterns." My brother's face darkened. "I don't need a lecture from my little brother. I asked for help, not financial counseling." "Actually, I corrected you. Didn't ask for help. Mom and Dad did on your behalf, and they're asking for my money that I worked hard to save. I think that entitles me to ask questions about how we got here." My father's face flushed. "That's enough, Ron. Everyone goes through tough times. When Tyler gets on his feet, he'll help you if you ever need it. That's how family works." The conversation flashed me back to countless smaller instances throughout our lives. The time I had to lend Tyler $40 for a date he'd promised to repay by the weekend, only to be told I was obsessing over money when I mentioned it 2 weeks later. Or the time he borrowed my nearly new textbooks for a class he ended up dropping, returning them with coffee stains and dog-eared pages. Or most recently when he borrowed my laptop just for the afternoon and returned it 3 days later with several keys sticking and no explanation. "I'm sorry," I said finally, "but I can't do it. I've been saving for almost 2 years for my down payment, and $3,000 would set me back months. Tyler needs to take responsibility for his own finances." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My mother's expression shifted from persuasive to wounded. "I can't believe how selfish you're being. Your brother would help you if the situations were reversed." "Would he?" I challenged, looking directly at Tyler. "Have you ever once helped me financially, Tyler? Or in any significant way since we've been adults?" Tyler pushed his chair back from the table. "This is bullshit. I didn't want to ask you anyway. I told them you'd make it weird." My father's voice took on the authoritative tone he used rarely but effectively. "That's enough, both of you. Ron, I'm disappointed. Very disappointed. We raised you to value family above material things. This isn't about material things," I tried to explain. "It's about patterns and consequences. If I pay this off, what happens the next time? And the time after that? Tyler needs to learn to manage his money, not just find someone else to clean up his messes." My mother was near tears now. "How can you be so cold? He's your brother. He's blood." The argument continued in circles for another 20 minutes, with my parents alternating between guilt trips, appeals to family loyalty, and increasingly thin assurances that this would be the last time Tyler needed such help. By the time I retreated to my room, the atmosphere in the house was thick with tension and unspoken resentments. The days that followed were excruciating. My mother adopted a martyred silence around me, sighing heavily whenever our paths crossed. My father was more direct in his disappointment, making pointed comments about modern values and looking out for number one. Tyler oscillated between avoiding me completely and making passive-aggressive remarks when we were forced to interact. I tried to maintain my normal routine, leaving for work early and sometimes stopping for coffee after my shift to delay my return home. I hoped the tension would gradually dissipate, as it had after previous family disagreements. But instead, it seemed to intensify with each passing day. What I didn't realize was that this conflict was merely the opening act in a family drama that was about to escalate beyond anything I could have imagined. For nearly a week after the credit card confrontation, I walked on eggshells around the house. I made sincere efforts to maintain peace while still standing firm on my decision. I offered to help Tyler create a budget and suggested he look into credit counseling services offered for free through our local community center. These attempts at compromise were met with eye rolls from Tyler and dismissive remarks from my mother about how I just didn't understand the pressures my brother was under. My car became my sanctuary during this period of household tension. It wasn't anything fancy, a 5-year-old Subaru Impreza I'd purchased used with 70,000 miles on it. But it was reliable good in Boston winters, and most importantly, it was the first major purchase I'd made entirely on my own. I'd saved for the down payment while in college, researched extensively before buying, and faithfully made every payment for 3 years until I owned it outright. That car represented financial independence to me, tangible proof that planning and persistence paid off. Tyler, meanwhile, drove a newer Ford Mustang with custom rims and a premium sound system, a car well beyond his budget that he'd bought on impulse during a brief period of financial stability 2 years earlier. The payments strained his inconsistent income, and he frequently complained about insurance and maintenance costs. I had kept my opinions to myself when he purchased it, despite knowing it was a financial time bomb. That bomb finally detonated on a rainy Thursday evening when Tyler came home cursing and slamming doors. His Mustang had broken down on the highway, and the initial diagnosis from the tow truck driver was grim major transmission failure, likely costing thousands to repair. This mechanical disaster couldn't have come at a worse time with Tyler between jobs and his credit already maxed out. Over dinner that night, my father announced he needed to speak with everyone about the transportation situation after we finished eating. My stomach tightened with apprehension as we moved to the living room for this impromptu family meeting. As you know, my father began Tyler's car needs major repairs that aren't financially feasible right now. He has several promising job interviews lined up, but he needs reliable transportation to get to them. My mother nodded along her expression, already set in the sympathetic concern she reserved exclusively for Tyler's problems. We've looked at rental options, but without income or available credit, that's not possible either. I had a sinking feeling about where this conversation was heading, but I wasn't prepared for how directly they would approach it. "Ron," my father said, fixing me with a serious look, "we think the most practical solution is for you to let Tyler use your Subaru until he's back on his feet. You can take the bus to work. There's a stop just 2 blocks away." The request hit me like a physical blow. You want me to give Tyler my car, the car I paid for myself? Not give, my mother corrected quickly. Just share until he sorts out his situation. You've always been so good at the bus schedules anyway, and it's better for the environment. Tyler sat slumped in the armchair, affecting an air of detachment, as if the conversation didn't revolve around him, but I caught the entitled expectation in his expression. "His job interviews are all over the metro area," my father continued. "The bus system isn't practical for him, but your office is on a direct line." The absurdity of their request fueled my growing frustration. Let me get this straight. Tyler buys a car he can't afford, doesn't maintain it properly, and now that it's broken down, the solution is for me to give up the car I saved for and maintained correctly. How does that make sense? My mother's expression hardened. "We're not asking forever, Ron. Just until he gets back on his feet. Why must you always make everything so difficult?" "I'm being difficult. Tyler has created this situation entirely through his own choices, and somehow I'm the problem because I don't want to sacrifice my transportation." Tyler finally spoke up. "If you don't want to help, just say so. Don't act like you're better than me because you drive a boring car and work a boring job." The conversation descended rapidly from there. My suggestions for reasonable alternatives were systematically rejected. "Could you help Tyler find an affordable used car? Something basic just for transportation," I offered. "He needs something reliable for the professional image at his interviews," my mother countered. "What about carpooling with Marcus, since they're friends and live nearby?" "Marcus works night shifts now," Tyler dismissed. "I could drive Tyler to his interviews if he schedules them around my work hours." "He can't control when companies want to interview him," my father said, impatiently. It became increasingly clear that they had already decided the only acceptable solution was my car in Tyler's possession. When I stood firm in my refusal, the familiar accusations began. "You've always been selfish with your things," my mother said, referencing childhood conflicts that had little relevance to our adult situation. "I never thought I'd raise a son who wouldn't help his own brother," my father added with deliberate disappointment in his voice. "This is why I don't count on you for anything," Tyler muttered. "You're not a team player, never have been." By the end of the evening, no resolution had been reached except a deeper entrenchment of positions and a household atmosphere that had deteriorated from tense to nearly unbearable. My parents avoided eye contact at breakfast the next morning. Tyler made a show of looking up bus routes to his interviews, sighing dramatically, and commenting on how many transfers would be required. The car issue created a new level of strain in our daily interactions. I began parking on the street rather than in our driveway after finding Tyler sitting in my car one evening just checking out the features. I started keeping my keys with me at all times after noticing they weren't where I'd left them on the kitchen counter. The home that had once been my safe place now felt like hostile territory where I constantly needed to be on guard. What hurt most during this period wasn't just the unreasonable demands, but the realization of how conditional my family's affection truly was. The warmth and approval I'd worked so hard for throughout my life could apparently be withdrawn the moment I refused to sacrifice my own well-being for Tyler's benefit. This revelation was painful but ultimately clarifying, illuminating patterns of dysfunction I'd normalized for years, but could no longer unsee. As the week progressed, I sensed that we were approaching a breaking point. The passive-aggressive comments, the cold shoulders, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room, all signaled that something was building. Still, I wasn't prepared for just how dramatically things would come to a head, or how permanently our family dynamic was about to change. The final confrontation occurred exactly 1 week after the car argument on a Saturday morning when everyone was home. I had just returned from an early gym session and was making breakfast when my father called from the living room Ron family meeting. Now, his tone left no room for negotiation. I turned off the stove and joined my parents and Tyler in the living room, where they were already seated and waiting, their expressions grim and determined. The atmosphere felt different this time, not just tense but resolute, as if a decision had already been made. My father wasted no time getting to the point. "Your mother and I have been talking, and we've reached the end of our patience with this situation. The constant tension in this house is affecting everyone's well-being." My mother sat with hands tightly clasped, nodding along with his words. Tyler lounged in the armchair with an expression that fluctuated between feigned disinterest and poorly concealed satisfaction. "We've raised you both to understand that family comes first," my father continued. "We support each other, especially in times of need. Tyler is facing a critical point in his life right now. Without transportation, he could miss opportunities that might finally give him the fresh start he needs." I opened my mouth to respond, but he held up his hand to silence me. "Let me finish. We've thought about this carefully, and we've come to a decision. Either you help your brother in his time of need, whether that's with the credit card debt or by sharing your car, or you need to find somewhere else to live." The ultimatum hung in the air like a physical presence. Despite the mounting tensions of the past weeks, I hadn't imagined it would come to this. My own parents were threatening to kick me out for refusing to enable my brother's irresponsibility. "Are you serious?" I finally managed. "You're choosing Tyler's convenience over having me in your home." My mother's voice quavered with emotion, but her words were firm. "We're choosing family values, Ron. We're choosing the son who understands what it means to be part of this family." "What about my values?" I countered, a new clarity emerging through my shock. "What about my belief that helping someone means encouraging responsibility, not perpetuating dependence? Doesn't that count for anything?" "Don't try to justify selfishness with fancy words," Tyler interjected. "You have the means to help but choose not to. It's that simple." In that moment, something crystallized within me, a recognition of the toxic dynamic I'd been part of for years. I had spent my entire life seeking approval by being the responsible one, the achiever, the son they could count on. But that role only held value when it directly benefited them or solved problems Tyler had created. My success wasn't celebrated. It was merely a resource to be tapped when needed. "I'm not giving Tyler my car," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And I'm not paying his credit card bill. Those aren't reasonable requests. And the fact that you're threatening to kick me out for refusing shows just how distorted our family relationship has become." My father stood up, his face flushed with anger. "Then you've made your choice. I want you out by tomorrow evening." Despite anticipating this response, hearing it spoken aloud hit me with unexpected force. "You're actually doing this. You're throwing your son out because he won't give up his car. We're asking you to leave because you've demonstrated you don't share our values," my mother said, tears now streaming down her face. "This isn't just about the car. It's about your unwillingness to help family in need." "This is manipulative, and you know it," I responded, my own emotions threatening to overwhelm me. "Tyler isn't in need. He's in a situation of his own making again, and your solution isn't to help him develop better habits but to punish me for not cleaning up his mess. Always the judgment, Tyler muttered. Always thinking you're better than everyone. I looked at each of them in turn, my father standing rigid with self-righteous anger, my mother weeping but unyielding, and Tyler, whose expression betrayed a satisfaction at seeing me finally face consequences for standing up to the family system. Fine, I said finally. If that's your decision, I'll be gone by tomorrow. The reality of what had just happened didn't fully register as I walked upstairs to my room. A strange calm descended as I pulled out my suitcases and began the surreal process of deciding what possessions were essential enough to take and what would have to be left behind. Clothes, laptop, important documents, my professional books and certifications, the photo album from my college graduation, one happy family moment I had treasured now tainted by our current reality. As I packed, no one came to check on me or reconsider the ultimatum. I heard my parents and Tyler talking in low voices downstairs, occasional laughs, punctuating their conversation as if a great tension had been relieved by my impending departure. The casual return to normalcy in their interactions while my life was being uprooted struck me as particularly cruel. By evening I had filled my car with the essentials and arranged the rest of my belongings neatly in my room. I found my parents in the kitchen and handed them my house key. I'll come back for the rest of my things once I have a permanent place, I said, struggling to keep my voice even. My mother looked as if she might say something conciliatory, but my father spoke first. That would be best. Let us know when, and we'll make sure someone's home. The clinical nature of his response confirmed that there would be no last-minute change of heart, no recognition of the extreme nature of their actions. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further, and walked out to my car, the very possession that had become the symbol of this family fracture. Sitting in the driver's seat, key in the ignition, I was overwhelmed by a wave of emotions so intense I couldn't immediately start the engine. Betrayal cut deepest, the realization that the people who should provide unconditional love had instead placed conditions I couldn't possibly accept. Beneath that was fear about my immediate future, anger at the injustice, and a profound sadness for what our family had become. I had $5,000 in savings, money that had been earmarked for my eventual down payment, but would now have to serve as an emergency fund. I had a stable job but no immediate housing prospects in Boston's expensive rental market. I had colleagues I was friendly with, but no close friends I felt comfortable asking for significant help. As twilight descended over the only neighborhood I'd ever called home, I finally started the car. With no clear destination in mind, I pulled away from the curb, watching the house recede in my rearview mirror, suddenly a stranger's home rather than my own. Whatever came next, I knew with absolute certainty that life would never be the same again. That first night was the hardest. After driving aimlessly for an hour, reality set in. I needed a place to sleep. Hotels in Boston were far too expensive for anything beyond a night or two, which would quickly deplete my savings. In desperation, I called Justin, a coworker I occasionally had lunch with, and awkwardly explained my situation. My parents kicked me out over a family disagreement, I said, trying to maintain dignity while asking for help. I just need somewhere to crash for a night or two until I figure things out. Justin's response surprised me. Dude, that's rough. My couch is yours for as long as you need it. I'm having a beer with some friends, but I'll text you the address and door code. Make yourself at home. His casual kindness brought me to the verge of tears. I had spent years believing that family was supposed to be your ultimate support system, yet here was someone I barely knew outside of work, offering help without hesitation. Justin's apartment was a small one-bedroom in Somerville, with a living room barely big enough for a sofa, television, and coffee table. But that cramped couch felt like luxury compared to the alternative. That night, staring at an unfamiliar ceiling in the dim glow of streetlights filtering through thin curtains, the full weight of my situation crashed down on me. I had lost my home, my family relationships, and the foundation I had built my life upon, all because I refused to sacrifice my financial stability for my brother's irresponsibility. The next morning I woke early and made coffee, determined not to be a burden on my host. When Justin emerged from his bedroom, I expressed my gratitude and assured him I'd be actively looking for housing. "No rush," he said, pouring himself coffee. "Been there myself a few years back. Parents didn't agree with my career choices. Sometimes family is tough." His matter-of-fact acceptance of my situation without judgment was exactly what I needed. Monday morning brought the challenge of maintaining professionalism at work, while my personal life was in chaos. I set up email alerts for apartment listings during lunch and began the discouraging process of apartment hunting in one of America's most expensive rental markets. Each listing seemed to require impossible combinations: affordable but dangerous neighborhoods, reasonable rent but 2-hour commutes, or decent locations with roommate requirements. I couldn't meet on short notice. By Wednesday, Justin had introduced me to his friend network, who treated me like a longtime acquaintance rather than an imposition. Rachel, a graphic designer in the group, offered particular support. "My brother got kicked out for being gay when we were teenagers," she shared quietly during a group dinner. "Family rejection is its own special kind of pain. Let me know if you ever need to talk." A week into my couch surfing arrangement, I still hadn't heard a word from my parents or Tyler. No calls, no texts, not even an email to check if I had somewhere to stay. Their silence spoke volumes about the conditional nature of their concern. I fluctuated between hurt anger and a growing determination to build something better for myself. The apartment search continued to be challenging, but after 2 weeks of persistent effort, I found a studio in Brighton that I could almost afford. It was small, barely 400 square feet, but clean, with a functioning kitchenette and its own bathroom. The rent would take nearly half my monthly income, leaving little for savings, but it offered the independence I desperately needed. "You're going to need furniture," Rachel pointed out after I signed the lease. The next day she showed up at Justin's with her SUV. "Thrift store tour. My treat for gas, your treat for lunch." That Saturday became a crash course in budget furnishing. We scoured thrift stores, consignment shops, and even a few curbside finds in gentrifying neighborhoods. By evening, we had secured a futon that doubled as a bed, a wobbly but functional desk, 2 mismatched dining chairs, and assorted kitchen necessities, all for less than $300. Rachel's eye for hidden gems and willingness to haggle had stretched my limited budget further than I thought possible. Moving into my tiny studio was simultaneously depressing and liberating. The space was certainly a step down from my comfortable bedroom in my parents' house, but it was mine, a place where no one could threaten to evict me for maintaining healthy boundaries. Justin, Rachel, and 2 other friends formed an impromptu moving crew, transforming the task into something almost resembling fun, complete with pizza and beers after everything was in place. "Welcome home," Rachel said, raising her bottle in a toast. "It's not much, but it's yours." Those words resonated deeply. Throughout my life, I had followed the prescribed path, studied hard, graduated with honors, secured a stable job, saved responsibly. Yet all of that responsible behavior had still left me vulnerable to family manipulation. This tiny apartment represented the beginning of true independence, not just financially, but emotionally. As weeks turned into months, I developed new routines. My commute was longer, my meals simpler, and my entertainment budget virtually non-existent. But I discovered unexpected benefits to my new circumstances. Without the constant tension of the family home, I slept better. Without the drain of emotional manipulation, I had more energy for my work, which led to increased productivity and positive attention from management. 3 months after being kicked out, I received a performance review with an unexpected promotion and raise. "Your focus and output have been exceptional lately," my supervisor noted. "Whatever changes you've made in your approach, they're working." The irony wasn't lost on me that removing myself from my toxic family environment had actually accelerated my professional growth. The raise wouldn't change my housing situation immediately, but it allowed me to start rebuilding my emergency fund and occasionally join friends for dinner without counting every dollar. Rachel's friendship continued to be a particular bright spot. She introduced me to her broader social circle, invited me to gallery openings and community events, and checked in regularly with thoughtful texts. When I mentioned feeling overwhelmed by processing my family situation, She recommended her therapist, who offered a sliding scale payment option. Dr. Catherine Mills became another cornerstone of my rebuilding process. In her gentle but direct manner, she helped me identify patterns in my family dynamics. I had never fully recognized the parentification that had made me responsible for adult problems from a young age. The golden child divided by scapegoat dynamic between Tyler and me. The emotional manipulation that had made love conditional on compliance. Family systems can be powerful forces, she explained, during one particularly insightful session. You've been trained your entire life to fulfill a specific role. Stepping out of that role, even when it's the healthy choice, triggers the system to try to pull you back in. Your parents and brother are responding to that disruption, not to you as a person. These insights didn't immediately heal the pain of rejection, but they provided a framework for understanding what had happened that wasn't based in self-blame. I hadn't failed as a son or brother. I had simply refused to participate in an unhealthy system any longer. 6 months into my new life, I realized I had inadvertently created something precious, a chosen family. Justin, Rachel, and several others had become my support system, offering the unconditional acceptance my biological family had withdrawn. We celebrated birthdays together, helped each other through work crises, and created new traditions like monthly board game nights and weekend hiking trips. During this period of growth, my biological family maintained complete radio silence. No calls on my birthday, no text at Thanksgiving, not even a generic Christmas card. I had expected at least some form of contact, and their complete absence created a grief process all its own. I mourned not just the loss of my actual family relationships, but the loss of what those relationships should have been. The hardest part of family estrangement, Dr. Mills observed, is often letting go of the fantasy of what family should be. You're grieving both the real relationship and the idealized one you deserved but never had. Through therapy and the support of friends, I gradually developed healthier perspectives on my worth and relationships. I learned that boundaries weren't selfish but necessary for genuine connection. I discovered that respect, not sacrifice, was the foundation of meaningful relationships. And most importantly, I realized that my value as a person wasn't determined by my usefulness to others. As the 1-year mark of my departure approached, I had created a life that, while different from what I had planned, contained genuine joy and authenticity. My studio apartment, initially just emergency shelter, had become a true home, with carefully chosen items that reflected my taste. My friend circle had expanded to include people with shared interests and values. My career continued on an upward trajectory, with a second promotion placing me in a junior management position. The growth I had experienced in that challenging year wasn't what I would have chosen, but it had transformed me in ways I came to value deeply. I had discovered resilience I didn't know I possessed, developed relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation, and built a life that honored my own needs without sacrificing care for others. While the pain of family rejection hadn't completely healed, it no longer defined me or dictated my choices. I had become the author of my own story, rather than a character in someone else's. 6 months after leaving my parents' home, I received an unexpected text from Barbara, my mother's longtime friend, who had been like an aunt to me growing up. Having coffee downtown tomorrow. Would love to see you if you're available. The message surprised me. Barbara had always been close with my mother, and I assumed she'd heard only one side of the family rift. We met at a small cafe near my office. Barbara hugged me warmly, her expression a mixture of affection and concern. "You look good," she said, studying my face. "Different somehow. More. Settled in yourself." Over cappuccinos, she gradually revealed the real purpose behind her outreach. Tyler had lost his job 3 months after I left, not the promising sales position that had been referenced during our final confrontation, but another stopgap retail position he'd taken when that opportunity fell through. According to Barbara, he had shown up late repeatedly, then called in sick for 3 consecutive shifts when a friend had spare tickets to a music festival. "Your parents are struggling," she admitted cautiously. "They've been helping Tyler with his car payments since he lost his job, and the credit card debt they wanted you to pay, it went to collections anyway." Their credit took a hit when they tried to help him consolidate it with their own cards. I absorbed this information with complicated emotions. Part of me felt a vindication that reality had confirmed my concerns about enabling Tyler. Another part felt genuine sadness for my parents' financial stress. But mostly I felt a strange detachment, like hearing about distant relatives rather than the people who had raised me. Tyler moved back home about 2 months ago, Barbara continued. From what your mother says, it's been challenging. He stays out late, sleeps until noon, and gets defensive whenever they ask about his job search. Your father and he had a significant argument last week when your dad suggested he look into trade school programs. I'm sorry they're having a hard time, I said sincerely, but I'm not sure why you're telling me this. Barbara sighed, lines of concern evident around her eyes. Your mother would never admit this, but I think they're beginning to see the pattern more clearly now that you're not there. You were always the buffer, Ron, the responsible one who balanced out the family dynamic. Without you, the problems with Tyler are harder to ignore or explain away. She hesitated before adding, Your mother asked about you last week. Not directly, she's still too proud for that, but she wanted to know if I had heard how you were doing. I think she regrets how things happened, even if she can't say it yet. This revelation stirred unexpected emotions. I had imagined my parents completely unmoved by my absence, continuing to focus exclusively on Tyler's needs. The thought that they might be questioning their decisions gave me pause, but not enough to break my firm boundary against re-engaging with their dysfunction. I appreciate you telling me this, Barbara. I really do. But I'm not in a place where I can get involved in their situation right now. I've finally created some stability for myself. Barbara nodded understanding, evident in her expression. I'm not suggesting you should rescue them. I just thought you deserved to know. And for what it's worth, I think you made the right choice standing your ground. It was long overdue. In the weeks following our coffee meeting, I processed this new information with Dr. Mills's help. It's natural to feel conflicted, she assured me. You can simultaneously feel concern for their struggles while maintaining the boundaries that protect your well-being. Meanwhile, my personal life continued to evolve in positive directions. My friendship with Rachel had gradually developed into something deeper. We shared similar values around financial responsibility, communication, and mutual support, creating a relationship foundation unlike anything I had experienced before. What I love about us, Rachel said one evening as we cooked dinner in my tiny kitchen, is that we're a team without keeping score. Neither of us is always giving or always taking. There's a balance. Her observation highlighted exactly what had been missing in my family relationships. In my parents' home, Tyler had been perpetually taking while I was expected to give, creating an imbalance that was ultimately unsustainable. With Rachel, I was experiencing for the first time what healthy reciprocity felt like. 9 months after leaving home, I received a second update from Barbara. This time, the news was more concerning. My father had experienced a minor heart attack, stress-related according to his doctors. He was stable and recovering, but the incident had thrown the family into both emotional and financial turmoil. Between medical bills and Tyler's continued unemployment, my parents were considering a second mortgage on their home. I'm not telling you this to make you feel responsible, Barbara assured me, but I thought you should know about your father's health situation. The news about my father's heart attack shook me more than I expected. Despite everything that had happened, these were still the people who had raised me. After discussing it with Rachel and Dr. Mills, I decided to send a brief email to my mother expressing concern about my father's health and wishing him a good recovery. I kept it simple and direct, offering no openings for discussions about reconciliation or financial assistance. To my surprise, my mother responded within hours with equal restraint. Thank you for your concern. Your father is recovering well and following doctor's orders. I hope you are well too. The absence of manipulation or guilt in her message felt significant, a small but noticeable shift from our previous patterns of communication. As the 1-year anniversary of my departure approached, I found myself reflecting on the dramatic changes in my life. Professionally, I had advanced further than I might have otherwise recently, leading a successful project that had earned recognition from upper management. Personally, my relationship with Rachel had deepened into something I could tentatively call love, though we were both proceeding with appropriate caution. My friendship circle had expanded to include people who appreciated me for who I was, not what I could do for them. Most significantly, my understanding of family had evolved. Family wasn't just blood relation or shared history, it was consistent respect, mutual support, and the freedom to be authentic without fear of rejection. By those measures, the friends who had stood by me through this challenging year were more family than the people who shared my DNA. When Barbara texted me exactly 1 year after I had left home, I was in a fundamentally different place emotionally than the wounded young man who had driven away with his possessions hastily packed in his car. I had created a life built on healthier foundations than the one I had left behind. I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed, and values I was no longer willing to compromise. "Your mother asked for your phone number," Barbara's message read. "I told her I would check with you first before sharing it. The choice is entirely yours." After careful consideration and consultation with Dr. Mills, I decided to allow Barbara to share my number. I wasn't ready to fully re-engage with my family, but I was secure enough in my boundaries to receive communication from them. Whatever they wanted to say, I was finally in a position to hear it without being devastated by either criticism or manipulation. 3 days later, as I was preparing Sunday breakfast in my studio apartment, my phone displayed an incoming call from an all-too-familiar number. Taking a deep breath, I answered, uncertain what this connection might bring, but confident in my ability to maintain the boundaries I had worked so hard to establish. The phone vibrated in my hand, my mother's name flashing on the screen. For a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something told me it was time to face whatever was coming. 1 year had passed since I walked out of my parents' house. A year of growth, independence, and healing. "Hello," I answered, my voice steadier than I expected. "Ron." My mother's voice sounded smaller, somehow lacking the confident authority I remembered. "It's Mom. Thank you for taking my call." The formal politeness was so unlike her usual communication that it momentarily threw me. "Of course. How are you?" "We're managing." She paused awkwardly. "Your father is doing better, following his diet and exercise plan from the doctors." "I'm glad to hear that." Another pause stretched between us, heavy with unspoken history. Finally, she continued, "I was wondering if you might be willing to meet with your father and me, just to talk. There are things we need to say to you in person." My immediate instinct was caution. "What kind of things?" "It's complicated to explain over the phone. We're not asking for anything, Ron. We just want to see you and talk. Perhaps coffee somewhere, neutral territory." The phrasing, "neutral territory," suggested they understood at least some of the damage that had been done. After confirming they weren't expecting me to bring Tyler or address his needs, I cautiously agreed to meet them at a cafe halfway between my apartment and their house the following Saturday afternoon. When I told Rachel about the planned meeting, her concern was immediate. "Are you sure you're ready for this? You don't owe them your time." "I know," I assured her, "but I think I need this for me, not for them. To face them from a position of strength rather than vulnerability, to show myself how much has changed." She squeezed my hand supportively. "Want me to be nearby? I could work on my laptop at another table just in case things get difficult." Her offer touched me deeply. That would actually help a lot. Saturday arrived with a mix of spring sunshine and cool breezes. Rachel and I arrived at the cafe 20 minutes early, giving her time to settle at a corner table while I chose a more central spot where my parents would easily find me. My stomach knotted with anxiety, but my resolve remained firm. Whatever happened today, I would maintain the boundaries I had worked so hard to establish. When my parents walked through the door, I was struck by how much they had aged in just 1 year. My father looked thinner with new lines etched around his eyes. My mother's hair showed more gray, and her typically perfect posture seemed slightly stooped. They spotted me immediately, but approached with hesitant steps rather than the confident stride I remembered. "Ron," my father said, his voice carrying a warmth I hadn't heard in our final interactions. "Thank you for meeting us." We exchanged awkward greetings before ordering coffee. As we waited for our drinks, my mother nervously rearranged the sugar packets while my father cleared his throat several times. Their discomfort was palpable, so unlike their usual position of parental authority. "How have you been?" my mother finally asked. "You look well." "I am well," I confirmed. "Work is good. I've been promoted twice. I have my own place, small but it's mine. I've made good friends." They nodded with what seemed like genuine interest, asking follow-up questions about my job and apartment. The conversation remained superficial until our coffee arrived, at which point my father set his cup down firmly and met my gaze directly. "Ron, we didn't ask you here for small talk. We owe you an apology, a significant one. Of all the scenarios I had mentally prepared for this, hadn't been among them." I remained silent, giving them space to continue. My mother picked up where he left off. "The way we treated you was wrong. Deeply wrong. We've had a year to reflect on our actions and there's no justification for what we did." "What specifically are you apologizing for?" I asked carefully. Their answer would tell me whether this was a genuine recognition of harm or merely an attempt to smooth things over. My father sighed heavily. "For making Tyler's problems your responsibility. For demanding you sacrifice your financial security to bail him out. For threatening your home when you refused. For actually following through on that threat." He looked down at his hands. "For failing you as parents when you needed us to be fair and supportive." What brought about this change in perspective? I kept my tone neutral, neither accepting nor rejecting their apology yet. My mother's eyes glistened with tears. "Reality has a way of clarifying things. After you left, Tyler's behavior worsened. Without you I suppose the counterbalance the patterns became impossible to ignore. He lost 3 more jobs," my father added. "Borrowed money from friends and didn't repay it. Maxed out another credit card we didn't know about. When he totaled his car driving after drinking, we finally had to face that we weren't helping him by constantly rescuing him. The breaking point came when he sold your father's golf clubs, a retirement gift from his company, to cover a gambling debt," my mother said quietly. "We confronted him, and he became verbally abusive, saying we owed him support because we're family." Her voice broke slightly. It was like hearing our own words thrown back at us, and suddenly we could see how twisted our logic had been. They continued explaining how the year had unfolded, Tyler eventually moving out again to live with a girlfriend, leaving them with unpaid bills he had promised to cover. Financial struggles that forced them to dip into retirement savings. The stress contributing to my father's heart attack. The slow, painful recognition that they had enabled behaviors that harmed not only Tyler but our entire family. "We don't expect forgiveness," my father said finally. "We don't even expect you to want a relationship with us again. But you deserve to hear directly from us that we were wrong, and we are deeply sorry for the pain we caused you." I sat in silence for a moment, processing their words. The apology seemed genuine, specific, taking responsibility rather than making excuses and without expectations of forgiveness. Still, a year of hurt couldn't be erased in one conversation. "I appreciate your apology," I said carefully. "It means something that you recognize what happened. But rebuilding trust takes time. If we were to have any relationship going forward, things would need to be fundamentally different." They both nodded in understanding. "What would that look like for you?" my mother asked. I outlined clear boundaries, no financial entanglements of any kind, respect for my independence and decisions, no pressure to reconcile with Tyler until or unless he demonstrated significant change, and an understanding that any future relationship would be on my terms, developing at my pace. "Those sound like reasonable boundaries," my father acknowledged. "More than reasonable given what happened." We talked for nearly 2 hours, moving gradually from the painful past toward tentative possibilities for the future. I learned that they had started attending a support group for parents of adult children with addiction and behavioral issues, which had helped them recognize their enabling patterns. They had also begun financial counseling to recover from the damage done to their retirement savings. When we finally prepared to leave, my mother asked hesitantly, would it be possible to meet again, perhaps in a few weeks, just to talk, no pressure for more? I considered the request. I think that would be okay. Small steps. As they stood to leave, My father extended his hand formally, then pulled back. Would a hug be too much to ask? The question held none of the entitlement that had characterized our last interactions. It was a genuine request, offered with the understanding that I had every right to refuse. After a moment's consideration, I nodded and accepted a brief, somewhat awkward embrace from each of them. As they left, Rachel joined me at the table. "How do you feel?" she asked, taking my hand. "Surprisingly okay," I answered truthfully. They seemed genuinely different, not perfect but changed in important ways. "Do you think you'll rebuild a relationship with them?" "Maybe. A different one than before. One with proper boundaries and mutual respect." I squeezed her hand. "The most important thing I realized sitting there is that I don't need them anymore. Not in the desperate way I once did. I have a life. I'm proud of people who value me for who I am. Reconnecting would be a choice, not a necessity." Over the following months, we established a cautious new pattern. Coffee every few weeks became dinner occasionally. I visited their home for the first time at Thanksgiving, bringing Rachel with me, as both emotional support and to introduce an important part of my new life. Tyler remained a complicated factor. He had moved back in with my parents after his relationship ended, still struggling with the same patterns of irresponsibility. My parents were attempting a different approach with him now, offering emotional support while withholding financial bailouts, encouraging therapy and vocational training rather than enabling joblessness. Whether this would lead to meaningful change remained to be seen. My relationship with Tyler himself remained distant. During my occasional visits, our interactions were civil but superficial. The bond of brotherhood had been too severely damaged for easy repair, and unlike my parents, Tyler showed little recognition of his role in what had happened or desire to make amends. I maintained firm boundaries with him, making it clear that any future relationship would depend on his choices and behavior. 6 months after our cafe reconciliation, my life had found a new equilibrium. Rachel and I had moved in together, combining our resources to rent a comfortable one-bedroom apartment. My career continued to advance with responsibilities that challenged and engaged me. The friends who had supported me during my darkest times remained central to my life, creating a chosen family that supplemented my cautiously reconstructed relationship with my parents. The journey from being kicked out to rebuilding on my own terms had taught me lessons I never expected to learn at 27. I discovered the difference between sacrifice and support. One depletes while the other strengthens. I learned that true family, whether biological or chosen, respects boundaries rather than punishing them. Most importantly, I realized that sometimes the most loving thing we can do for others is to refuse to participate in their self-destruction, even when that refusal comes at great personal cost. Standing firm on my principles had cost me my home and family temporarily, but ultimately led to something more valuable: a life built on authentic relationships, mutual respect, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your own worth. The painful year of separation had transformed all of us in ways that might not have been possible, otherwise creating space for healthier connections than what came before. Looking back on that devastating moment when I drove away from my childhood home with nowhere to go, I never could have imagined that it would lead to where I am now, stronger, more resilient, and surrounded by people who value me for exactly who I am. Sometimes it seems you have to lose what you thought you needed to discover what you truly deserve. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between maintaining your boundaries and keeping peace with family? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more content like this, and share with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself can lead to unexpected blessings even when it feels impossible in the present moment. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that ultimately set you free.